Yes, so Pride Planning Regional Infrastructure and Digital Environment is looking to see how we can use a digital platform to share information to make sure that our decision making for regional infrastructure is optimised. Can you move on to the next slide, please? And again. Great. So today we'll quickly go through some introductions before looking at the problem that Pride was trying to address, a respective review of the work that's been done, and then looking again to the alpha phase. Next slide, please. And again. So I'm Jenny Woodruff. I work for National Grid Electricity Distribution, and I was one of the original team kicking off the Pride project. I'm also joined today by Stuart Fowler from National Grid ESO, from West Midlands Combined Authority, we've got Kate and Eleanor, and from Advanced Infrastructure Technologies, we've got Christopher Jackson. Next slide, please. At this point, I'll hand over to Kate.
Great. Thanks, Jenny, and hi, everyone. So the problem that we are trying to address with the Pride project is that we know that we need a radical shift in the level of low carbon technology deployment to reach our net zero goals. But at the moment, that rollout is hampered by market uncertainty. We, as a team, have identified that local area energy planning, or LAEP, as an unhelpful acronym, as a tool to helping us to reduce market uncertainty. And it does that in a number of ways. So we're looking to kind of bring together and overlay both national and locally held data sets. It helps us to build the business case for locally led initiatives. And you just heard about the TEED project, for example, which can then help catalyse kind of wider market rollout. And then we want to also take it full circle and use local area energy planning to help us to mitigate for some of the remaining infrastructure barriers by providing evidence to feed back into things like the DFES and FES planning functions to help us to influence future energy investment in the networks to make sure it's going in the right place at the right time. So that's great. But there's a further problem. Local area energy planning as a process is really helpful, and in fact it's been endorsed by Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, and we put it in our Trailblazing Devolution deal. We think it's a really good thing to be doing. But at the end of the process, if you end up with a static plan, you can't ask that plan questions such as, what if the rollout of solar is faster than you expected? We know that, this has happened in the past and it's tripped us up. Or what if we were to be granted powers to designate heat network zones, for example, which would fundamentally change the way that people kind of decarbonise heat in a certain area. If your plan doesn't account for that when you've done your plan and it's a static plan, then it really does kind of derail you in terms of what you need to do next. So what we then look to do, or lend to see if we could utilise digital tools to help us carry out some of the processes of local area energy planning, whilst remaining a dynamic reflection of the changing energy landscape. What do we mean by that? Well, we wanted to see if developing a prototype data platform to help us visualise and contextualise some of these multiple data sets, that we could achieve many of the aims of the local area energy planning process. So in the discovery phase for this project, we had the advantage because we took some really rich data sets, well over 100, that were developed as part of a previous Innovate UK project called RESO, Regional Energy System Operator, which David has alluded to. It's from the Innovate UK sponsored project. And in that project, we looked at the city of Coventry, and we were able to gather a vast amount of data. And we're able to pull a lot of those data sets into a tool to be able to kind of interrogate it, to be able to look into it in much more detail. We also ran a number of workshops and gathered a lot more data, really, to develop a large range of potential use cases that could be supported by that tool. We looked at the organisational and governance structures that might be needed to ensure the data sits at the centre of energy investment decisions for the city. In Alpha, when looking to develop that further by deep diving into a subset of those use cases, as well as continuing to develop the governance design alongside national regulatory changes that we may expect to come down the line, such as the potential introduction for the Regional System Plan, or RSP, and prepare for a full-scale trial in beta ready for rollout. And I'm going to hand over to Christopher to talk about how this project sits at the intersection of a number of initiatives which are looking to redefine the planning of our future energy system to reach net zero.
Thanks, Kate. So it's worth taking a moment, next slide, please. So it's worth taking a moment to understand how this project is innovative and how it sits within the innovation landscape of other projects. This Venn diagram on the right shows 3 areas of innovation which have been active in recent years. So first of all, starting in the top right circle is interoperability and standards. So in round 1 of the CIFs, there were 2 projects that explored this theme, and they were the ESO's virtual energy system and Southern Gas Network's gas system of the future digital twin. And both of these projects identified over 30 use cases for digital twins and favoured the development of an ecosystem of digital twins that would be deployed for each use case and that would be interoperable with each other. Also, both projects independently identified the local area energy planning use case as being particularly worthy. In the bottom circle are projects that explored organizational and governance and non-technical barriers to place-based net zero transitions. Both RESO and Accelerating Net Zero Delivery identified over £81 billion of benefits to locally planned and optimized energy transitions. And in the top right, there have been a number of projects that use digital tools to accelerate aspects of local area energy planning, such as Project EPIC, Project RESOP, and Project Clio. What's unique about this project is that it combines all 3 innovation areas and explores in a deep dive the use case of digital tools to enable local area energy planning. Next slide, please. So as part of this project, we deployed the prototype of the digital tool on the Coventry city area. As Kate mentioned, Coventry holds over 100 data sets that are valuable, that are of value for local area energy planning, but decision-making offices lack the skills to visualize and interpret the data. So key data sets were visualized on the tool for Coventry Council users, and user research was undertaken as to how the tool performed. I'll now pass over to Eleanor, who will take us through the learnings from each of the 3 work packages.
Have the next slide, please. And one more. Thank you. So yeah, I'm going to start by showing what we've discovered during the discovery phase of CIF, starting with work package 2, just to try and set out some of the, I guess, organisational issues, which was also sort of alluded to in the TEED project. So essentially, we've got sort of a map, and it's showing the network kind of operator or provider areas for Severn Trent Water, Cadent, for the West Midlands block, National Grid, ED for the West Midlands and East Midlands, and then we've kind of overlaid the local authority areas for the WMCA, as well as the kind of LEP areas and the Midlands Net Zero Hub, just to sort of explain what that means. So we've sort of know that alignment between administrative and physical boundaries of infrastructure providers and local authorities would be critical in most effectively designing and developing these local area energy plans, and then successfully achieving local decarbonisation, and particularly kind of decarbonising those major assets. However, kind of the reality is that that alignment and actually sort of changing those physical boundaries would be incredibly difficult and would require some sort of major restructuring. So what we're looking to do as part of this work package in Pride is looking at the different organisational options and structures that could be considered in order to overcome those boundaries and those sort of difficulties in a way that isn't a restructuring. So in terms of using the digital tool, we hope that using that tool with the further innovations, we can essentially kind of overcome the boundaries by kind of having a visual data layer that sits above that, and it will provide a technical solution to, I guess, yeah, sort of the boundaries that exist as they are. I'll pass back over to Christopher, I think.
Thanks. Next slide, please. So in this work package, we mapped and valued sub-use cases that describe in more detail the overarching local area energy planning use case identified in previous SIF projects. And we mapped 17 use cases that we have clustered into 4 benefit groups, depending upon the user group to which those benefits occur. So from left to right, the first benefit group are local authorities. And these 6 use cases focus on reducing organizational barriers between the different levels of local government and other institutions to improve access to data. So these include creating decarbonisation scenarios, unlocking finance with more robust revenue projections and business cases, and includes a digital stakeholder engagement and democratization of decision making, monitoring and reporting against progress towards net zero, and support for data-driven and evidence-based grant applications. The second benefit group is the private sector, and these 6 use cases focus on reducing project development costs through more timely access to data and analytical tools to make faster decisions about where and where not to cite low carbon technologies. And the range of technologies include renewable generation, building energy efficiency, electric vehicle infrastructure, energy storage, and renewable heating. And the third benefit group are energy networks, and these use cases focus on self-service tools for new connection requests and reducing the workload experienced by particularly electricity networks responding to new connection requests. Secondly, digital workflows to submit to support distribution network operators' new ED2 requirement to support local authority energy planning activity. And thirdly, forecasting future customer demand to better align with strategic investment. Now, on the next slide, please. We explored a number of ways in which we could prioritize these use cases. And on the chart on the right-hand side, we've mapped the use cases by risk and reward. So the highest reward and lowest risk is kind of green in the bottom right, and the lowest reward and highest risk is red on the top left. So if we cluster the use cases by the benefit groups I described previously, we can see that local authority benefits are the easiest to address and the largest benefit, followed by a private sector benefits group as the second. And we've shortlisted the use cases for 3 use cases for alpha phase development, being renewable heating, electric vehicle infrastructure deployment, and optioneering and zoning. Next slide, please. So work package 3 explored what data sets are required to achieve each use cases. And we explored what the data model linking the use cases should be. And we explored how to align the project with the ESO's of virtual energy systems learnings. And this slide summarizes a similar point that I think was just made by Project TEED, in that building stock and individual building stock data is very important to the delivery of local energy systems, and we would agree with that. But what we're trying to highlight in this chart is that there is what we describe as a strategic delivery barrier between a top-down strategic plans and projections in the form of future energy scenarios and DFESs, and bottom-up local area energy plans. And the challenge is if a local authority institution wants to use a DFES or as a FES as part of their strategy, what they're missing is the building level data that projection was made upon. And we call this the delivery gap because although local authorities may know generally where to deploy a technology, they don't know on which building. And the reason being is that most of the local area energy planning and the other forecasting that has occurred before has been done at a unit of resolution of an LSOA of 1,000 or more houses. And you really do hit that dotted line when you try and move from a zone of 1,000 houses to, well, which house in particular. And that's the problem of that descending arrow on the left-hand side. So what we're proposing is a change to the modelling approach with the arrow on the right-hand side, where there is no aggregation to LSOA, and that the underlying building level data is passed through between all different levels of modelling. And we think that's an important change to make in the modelling approaches at all three levels in the energy transition, whether that be at transmission, at distribution, or at the local level. That's the main sort of learning from work package 3 that we wanted to underline. I think I now pass back to the next speaker.
Just a 1-minute warning.
We have the next slide, please.
I think it's going to be me, isn't it? Yeah, so before, I think Jenny just talks about alpha. I thought it was just useful just to explain why ESO is involved in Pride. And I think Kate and Eleanor have both articulated that, you know, if we're going to meet net zero, we need to think differently. And the same applies to us. So if you accept that local area planning needs to include energy, then as we move away from National Grid to become FSO next year, it means that we're going to have to think differently about what we do as a business, as well as what that also means for GB. And so therefore, I think Pride offers us a unique opportunity to learn about what local area energy planning might look like, you know, what that means in terms of the capabilities that we might need to acquire, new data streams and all of that, but being cognizant of place, because I think as Kate has mentioned before, place will be, you know, a vital consideration for us. And then hopefully we can then repurpose the learning from Pride and apply it to GB. And then I think I hand back to Jenny, don't I?
Yes, next slide, please. So just to round off, we see the alpha phase as having two main work streams. One to do with the development of the digital platform to enhance the features relating to those three selected use cases. We'll do some deep dive workshops to make sure that we're selecting the enhancements that make the most sense for people, and then go through the normal process of development and testing before using local authority staff to test the enhancements that are made and suggest improvements for the beta phase project. On the other side, the organisational trial development, we've got a proposed organisational structure that we want to test out. It would be fantastic if we had enough staff to actually have two teams working in parallel, one working the old way, one working the new way, but that's not likely to happen. We're going to have to work out how we can simulate the key elements of a particular way of working, a particular organisation in that trial phase that's planned for the beta part of the project. So who participates, how, where, when, and what those preparation activities need to be. We're looking at Coventry as a test area, and we've already done some importing of their data, and that's looking very, very encouraging. So that wraps it up for today.
Brilliant. Thank you all very much for a very comprehensive presentation. I've got one quick question that we'll try and fit in. From your perspective of, you're looking by the sounds of it at how responsibilities for different institutions and actors might shift, but not necessarily looking at whether new institutions themselves are required. Is that within the scope, and is there a reason that you've decided that that's not the route to go down?
We have tried to reflect what we think will happen with the shift to the regional planner role and also the FSO role to see how that would shape an optimal organisation that will be able to deliver local planning most effectively.
I think the other half of that question is that there is going to have to be some fundamental governance shifts from the kind of from the democratic accountable bodies, the local government, you know, the local authorities, the combined authorities that feed into that local planning piece, and that is actually a big factor of what we've been looking at thus far. So how do we within our own organizations help to speak a shared language that we can then build the evidence base together and be able to have those informed decisions? And that's also a big change from a kind of local government point of view as well. So I think we have to look at kind of both sides of the coin in that respect.
I think also, David, I think that, you know, there's a level of uncertainty about where some of this stuff sits now anyway, and I think it's about, for me anyway, it's about learning by doing and just finding out, you know, what's the optimal way to make this happen. You know, because I think, as I said, and I think Kate said, you know, this is challenging enough as it is without having to factor in the fact that, you know, we've got to engage however many million people in the UK.